or we'll burn you out. Dead silence fell, except for the shuffling of a few feet as men drew back. Two Rivers folk could fight back if they were attacked, but violence was far from common, and threatening people was foreign to them, beyond the occasional shaking of a fist. Sen Bowie, Billy Conger, and the Coplans were left out front alone. Billy looked as if he wanted to back away too.
Time to
Ari
get
gave an
serious.
uneasy start at the lack of support, but he recovered quickly. "Get out!" he shouted again, echoed by Darl, and more weakly by Billy. Ari glared at the others. Most of the crowd failed to meet his eye. Suddenly, Bran Alvear and Harald Luhan moved out of the shadows, stopping apart from both the Aes Sedai and the crowd. In one hand, the mayor casually carried the big wooden maul he used to drive the spigots into camp. "Did someone suggest burning us?" he asked softly. The two Coplans took a step back, and Sen Bowie edged away from them. Billy Conger dived into the crowd. "Not that," Darl said quickly. "We never said that, Bran. Mayor?" Bran nodded. "Then perhaps I heard you threatening to harm guests in my inn?" "He's an Aes Sedai," Ari began angrily, but his words cut off as Harald Luhan
To the
moved.
victor go this morning.
The blacksmith simply stretched, thrusting thick arms over his head, tightening massive fists until his knuckles cracked. But Hari looked at the burly man as if one of those fists had been shaken under his nose. Harald folded his arms across his chest.
Time to
"Your
get
pardon,
serious.
Hari. I did not mean to cut you off. You were saying..." But Hari, his shoulders hunched as though he were trying to draw into himself and disappear, seemed to have nothing more to say. "I'm surprised, you people," Bran rumbled. "Take our car. Your boy's leg was broken last night, but I saw him walking on it today because of her. There was Candace. You were lying on your belly with a gash down your back like a fish for clean, till she laid hands on you.
The old man
Now it
still...
looks as if it happened a month ago. And unless I misdoubt, there'll be barely a scar. And you, Sen..." The Thatcher started to fade back into the crowd, but stopped, held uncomfortably by Bran's gaze. "I'd be shocked to see any man on the village council here, Sen. But you, most of all. Your arm would still be hanging useless at your side, a mass of burns and bruises, if not for her. If you have no gratitude, have you no shame?" Sen half lifted his right hand, then looked away from it angrily. "I cannot deny what she did," he muttered, and he did sound ashamed. "She helped me, and I..." went on in a pleading tone. "But she's an Aes Sedai, Bran. If those Trollocs didn't come because of her, why did they come? We want no part of Aes Sedai in the Two Rivers. Let them keep their troubles away from us." A few men, safely back in the crowd, shouted, "We want no Aes Sedai trouble. Send her away. Drive her out. Why did they come if not because of her?" A scowl grew on Bran's face.
We got
But
this,
before he
Vanille.
could speak, Moiraine suddenly whirled her vine-carved staff above her head, spinning it with both hands. Bran's gasp echoed that of the villagers, for a hissing white flame flared from each end of the staff, standing straight out like a spear point.
Follow the old
Broad
man's
forward.
lead.
Even Bran and Harrow edged away from her. She snapped her arms down straight out before her, the staff parallel to the ground, but the pale fire still jetted out, brighter than the torches. Men shied away, held up hands to shield their eyes from the pain of that brilliance. "Is this what Aemon's blood has come to?" The Aes Sedai's voice was not loud, but it overwhelmed every other sound.
I'm tougher than you thought, huh?
Little people squabbling for the right to hide like rabbits? You have forgotten who you were. Forgotten what you were. But I had hoped some small part was left. Some memory in blood and bone. Some shred to steel you for the long night coming. No one spoke. The two Coplans looked as if they had never wanted to open their mouths again. Bran said, "Forgotten who we were. We are who we always have been. Honest farmers
It's running
and
inside of the
shepherds. Two rivers. To the south,
Way to go!
lies the river you call the White River. But far to the east of here, men call it still by its rightful name, Mon Ephraim. In the old tongue, waters of the mountain home. Sparkling waters that once coursed through a land of bravery and beauty. 2,000 years ago,
See you, Daddy, now.
Mon flowed by the walls of a mountain city, so lovely to behold that Ogier stonemasons came to stare in wonder. Farms and villages covered this region, and that you call the Forest of Shadows as well, and beyond. But all of those folk thought of themselves as the people of the mountain home, the people of Manetheren. Their king was Aemon Alcar Althorin, Aemon, son of Car, son of Thorin, and Eldraine, Elan, Tar, was his queen. Aemon, a man so fearless that the greatest compliment for courage any could give, even among his enemies, was to say a man had Aemon's heart. Eldraine, so beautiful that it was said the flowers bloomed to make her smile. Bravery and beauty and wisdom, and a love that death could not sunder. Weep if you have a heart for the loss of them, for the loss of even their memory. Weep for the loss of their blood. She fell silent then, but no one spoke. Rand was as bound as the others in the spell she had created. When she spoke again, he drank it in, and so did the rest. For nearly 2 centuries, the Trolloc Wars had ravaged the length and breadth of the world, and wherever battles raged, the Red Eagle banner of Manetheren was in the forefront. The men of Manetheren were a thorn to the Dark One's foot, and a bramble to his hand. Sing of Manetheren, that would never bend knee to the shadow. Sing of Manetheren, the sword that could not be broken. They were far away, the men of Manetheren, on the field of Bekkar, called the Field of Blood, when news came that a Trolloc army was moving against their home. Too far to do else but wait to hear of their land's death, for the forces of the Dark One meant to make an end of them. Kill the mighty oak by hacking away its roots. Too far to do else but mourn. But they were the men of the mountain home. Without hesitation, without thought for the distance they must travel, they marched from the very field of victory, still covered in dust and sweat and blood. Day and night they marched, for they had seen the horror a Trolloc army left behind it, and no man of them could sleep while such a danger threatened Manetheren. They moved as if their feet had wings, marching further and faster than friends hoped or enemies feared they could. At any other day that march alone would have inspired songs. When the Dark One's armies swooped down upon the lands of Manetheren, the men of the mountain home stood before it with their backs to the Tarendrel. Some villager raised a small cheer then, but Moraine kept on as if she had not heard. The host that faced the men of Manetheren was enough to daunt the bravest heart. Ravens blackened the sky. Trollocs blackened the land. Trollocs and their human allies. Trollocs and dark friends in tens of thousands, and dread lords to command. At night their cook-fires outnumbered the stars, and dawn revealed the banner of Baal-Zaman at their head. Baal-Zaman, Heart of the Dark. An ancient name for the father of lies. The Dark One could not have been free of his prison at Shale Ghul, for if he had been, not all the forces of humankind together could have stood against him. But there was power.
Can we just talk this over?
Dread lords, and some evil that made that light-destroying banner seem no more than right, and sent a chill into the souls of men who faced it. Yet they knew what they must do. Their homeland lay just across the river. They must keep that host and the power witches from the mountain home. Aemon had sent out messengers. Aid was promised if they could hold for but 3 days with the Tarendrel. Hold for 3 days against odds that should have overwhelmed them in the first hour.
Watch and learn, kid.
Through bloody assaults and desperate defense, they held through an hour, and the second hour, and the third. For 3 days they fought, till the land became a butcher's yard. No crossing of the Tarendrel did they yield. By the third night, no help had come, and no messengers, and they fought on alone. For 6 days, for 9, and on the 10th day, Aemon knew the bitter taste of betrayal. No help was coming. They could hold the river crossings no more. Where did they go?
Way to go, Saz!
A forest fire flickered in the still night breeze, but no one made a move to draw a cloak tighter.
I'm tougher than you thought, huh?
Aemon crossed the Tarendrel, Moraine told them, destroying the bridges behind him. And he sent word throughout his land for the people to flee. For he knew the powers with the Trolloc horde would find a way to bring it across the river. Even as the word went out, the Trolloc crossing began. And the soldiers of Manetheren took up the fight again, to buy with their lives what hours they could for their
Guess
people to
running's
escape.
out of the question.
From the city of Manetheren, Eldraine organized the flight of the people into the deepest forest and the fastness of the mountain. But some did not flee. First in a trickle, then in a river, then a flood. Men went not to safety, but to join the army fighting for their land. Shepherds with bows and farmers with pitchforks. And woodsmen with arrows. Women went too, shouldering what weapons they could find and marching side by side with their men. No one made that journey who did not know they would never return. But it was their land. It had been their fathers, and it would be their children. And they went to pay the price of it. Not a step of ground was given up until it was soaked in blood. But at the last, the army of Monetharan was driven back. Back to here. To this place you now call Emond's Field. And here the Trolloc hordes surrounded them. Her voice held the sound of cold fear. Trolloc dead and the corpses of human renegades piled up in mounds, but always more scrambled over those charnel heaps in waves of death that had no end. There could be but one finish. No man or woman who had stood beneath the banner of the Red Eagle at that day's dawning still lived when night came. The swords that could not be broken were shattered. In the mountains of mist, alone in the empty city of Monetharan, Eldraine felt Aemon die, and her heart died with him. And where her heart had been was left only a thirst for vengeance.
We got this,
Vengeance for her
Vanille.
love. Vengeance for her people and her land. Driven by grief, she reached out to the true source and hurled the one power at the Trolloc army. And there the Dreadlords died wherever they stood, whether in their secret councils
Follow the
or
old
in
man's
their
lead.
soldiers. In the passing of a breath, the Dreadlords and the generals of the Dark One's host burst into flame. Fire consumed their bodies, and terror consumed their just victorious honor. Now they ran like beasts before a wildfire in the forest, with no thought for anything but escape. North and south they fled. Thousands ran attempting to cross the Tarandrel without the aid of the Dreadlords. And at the Monethan Drell, they tore down the bridges in their flight at what might be following them. Where they found people, they slew and burned. But to flee was the need that gripped them. Until at last, no one of them remained in the lands of Monetharan. They were dispersed like dust before the whirlwind. The final vengeance came more slowly, but it came. When they were hunted down by other peoples, by other armies in other lands. None was left alive of those who did murder at Aemond's
Time to get
Field.
serious.
But the price was high for Monetharan. Eldraine had drawn to herself more of the one power than any human could ever hope to wield unaided. As the enemy generals died, so did she die. The fires that consumed her consumed the empty city of Monetharan. Even the stones of it, down to the living rocks of the mountain. Yet the people had been finished. Nothing was left of their farms, their villages, or their great city. Some would say there was nothing left for them, nothing but to flee to other lands, where they could begin anew. They did not say so. They had paid such a price in blood and hope for their land as had never been paid before, and now they were bound to that soil by ties stronger than steel. Other wars would rack them in years to come, until at last their corner of the world was forgotten. And at last, they had forgotten wars and the ways of war. Never again did Monetharan rise. Its soaring spires and splashing fountains became as a dream that slowly faded from the minds of its people. But they and their children, and their children's children, held the land that was theirs. They held it when the long centuries had washed the why of it from their memories. They held it until today. There is you. Weep for Monetharan. Weep for what is lost forever. The fires on Moraine's staff winked out, and she lowered it to her side as if it weighed 100 pounds. For a long moment, the moan of the wind was the only sound. Then Pate Alcar shouldered past the Coplans. I don't know about your story, the long-jawed farmer said. I'm no thorn to the Dark One's foot, nor ever likely to be, neither. But my will is walking because of you, and for that I am ashamed to be here. I don't know if you can forgive me, but whether you will or no, I'll be going. And for me, you can stay in Emond's Field as long as you like. With a quick duck of his head, almost a bow, he pushed back through the crowd. Others began to mutter then, offering shamefaced penitence before they, too, slipped away one by one. The Coplans, sour-mouthed and scowling once more, looked at the faces around them and vanished into the night without a word. Billy Conger had disappeared even before his cousin. Bland pulled Rand back and shut the door.
Time to get serious.
Let's go, boy. The warder started for the back of the inn. Come along, both of you, quickly. Rand hesitated, exchanging a wondering glance with Matt. While Moraine had been telling the story, Master Alvear's urine got him dragging away, but now something else held his feet. This was the real beginning, leaving the inn and following the warder into the night. He shook himself and tried to firm his resolve. He had no choice but to go, but he would come back to Emmonsfield, however far or long his journey was. What are you waiting for? Glenn asked from the door that led out of the back of the company. It was dark. Matt hurried to it. Trying to convince himself that he was beginning a grand adventure, Rand followed them through the dark and out into the stable yard. Chapter 10. Sleeve making. A single lantern, its shutters half closed,
I'm tougher than
hung
you
from
thought,
a nail on
huh?
a stall post, casting a dim light. Deep shadows swallowed most of the stalls. As Rand came through the doors from the stable yard, hard on the heels of Matt and the warder, Perrin leaped up in a rustle of straw from where he had been sitting with his back against the stall door. A heavy cloak swathed him. Bland barely paused to demand, "Did you look the way I told you, blacksmith?" "I looked," Perrin replied. "There's nobody here but us. Why would anybody hide?" "Care and a long life go together, blacksmith." The warder ran a quick eye around the shadowed stable and the deeper shadows of the hayloft above, then shook his head. He muttered half to himself, "Hurry." As if to suit his words, he strode quickly to where the 5 horses stood tethered, bridled, and saddled at the back of the pool of light. 2 were the black stallion and white mare that Rand had seen before. The others, if not quite so tall or so sleek, certainly appeared to be among the best the 2 rivers had to offer. With hasty care, Land began examining cinches and girth straps, and the leather ties that held saddlebags, water skins, and blanket rolls behind the saddle. Rand exchanged shaky smiles with his friends, trying hard to look as if he really was eager to be off. For the first time, Matt noticed the sword at Rand's waist and pointed to it. "Is he becoming a warder?" He laughed, then swallowed it with a quick glance at Land. The warder apparently took no notice. Or at least the merchant's guard, and went on with a grin, to report. He hefted his bow. "An honest man's weapon isn't good enough for him." Rand thought about flourishing the sword, but Land being there stopped him. The warder was not even looking in his direction, but he was sure the man was aware of everything that went on around him. Instead, he said with exaggerated casualness, "It might be useful," as if wearing a sword were nothing out of the ordinary. Perrin moved, trying to hide something under his cloak. Rand glimpsed a wide leather belt encircling the apprentice blacksmith's waist, with the handle of an axe thrust through a loop on the belt. "What do you have there?" he asked. "Merchant's guard indeed," Matt hooted. The shaggy-haired youth gave Matt a frown that suggested he had already had more than his share of joking, then sighed heavily and tossed back his cloak to uncover the axe. It was no common woodsman's tool. A broad half-moon blade on one side of the head and a curved spike on the other made it every bit as strange to the 2 rivers as Rand before. Perrin's hand rested on it with a sense of familiarity. "Master Luhan made it about 2 years ago for a woodbuyer's guard. But when it was done, the fellow wouldn't pay what he had agreed, and Master Luhan would not take less. He gave it to me when..." He cleared his throat, and shot Rand the same warning frown he'd given Matt. "When he found me practicing with it, he said I might as well have it since he couldn't make anything useful from it." "Practicing," Matt snickered.
Follow the old man's lead.
Soothingly when Perrin raised his head. "I have to say, it's just as well one of us knows how to use a real weapon." "That bow is a real weapon," Lance said suddenly. He dropped an arm across the saddle of the tall black and regarded them gravely. "So are the slings I assume we village boys with. Just because you never use them for anything but hunting rabbits or chasing a wolf away from the sheep makes no difference. Anything can be a weapon. A man or woman who holds it has the nerve and will make it so. Frolics aside, you had better have that clear in your mind before we leave the 2 rivers.
Yes!
Before we leave Emmonsfield, if you want to reach Tarvalon alive." His face and voice, cold as death and hard as a rough-hewn gravestone, stifled their smiles and their tongues. Perrin grimaced and and pulled his cloak back over the axe. Matt stared at his feet and stirred the straw on the stable floor with his toe. The warder grunted and went back to his checking. The silence lengthened. It isn't much like the stories, Matt said finally. I don't know, Perrin said sourly. Trollocs, a warder, an Aes Sedai. What more could you ask?
Let's get this over with.
Aes Sedai, Matt whispered, sounding as if he were suddenly cold. Do you believe her, Rand? Perrin asked. I mean, what would Trollocs want with us? As one, they glanced at the warder. Lan appeared absorbed in the white mare's saddle girth, but the three of them moved back toward the stable door, away from Lan. Even so, they huddled together and spoke softly. Rand shook his head. I don't know, but she had it right about our farms being the only ones attacked. And they attacked Master Luhan's house in the forge first, here in the village. I asked the mayor. It's as easy to believe they are after us as anything else you can think of. Suddenly he realized they were both staring at him. You asked the mayor? Matt said incredulously. She said not to tell anybody. I didn't tell him why I was asking, Rand protested. Do you mean you didn't talk to anybody at all? You didn't let anybody know you were going? Perrin shrugged defensively. Moraine Sedai said not anybody. We left notes, Matt said, for our families. They'll find them in the morning. Matt, my mother thinks Tar Valon is the next thing to Sheo Ghul. He gave a little laugh to show he did not share her opinion. It was not very convincing. She'd try to lock me in the cellar if she believed I was even thinking of going there. Master Luhan is stubborn as a stone, Perrin added, and Mistress Luhan is worse. If you'd seen her digging through what's left of the house, saying she hoped the Trollocs did come back so she could get her hands on them. Burn me, Rand, Matt said. I know she's an Aes Sedai and all, but the Trollocs were really here. She said not to tell anybody. If an Aes Sedai doesn't know what to do about something like this, who does? I don't know. Rand rubbed at his forehead. His head hurt. He could not get that dream out of his mind. My father believes her. At least he agreed that we had to go. Suddenly, Moraine was in the doorway. You talked to your father about this journey? She was clothed in dark gray from head to foot, with a skirt divided for riding astride. And the serpent ring was the only gold she wore now. Rand eyed her walking staff. Despite the flames he had seen, there was no sign of charring, or even soot. I couldn't go off without letting him know. She eyed him for a moment, with pursed lips before turning to the others. And did you also decide that a note was not enough? Matt and Perrin talked on top of each other, assuring her they had only left notes, the way she had said. Nodding, she waved them to silence and gave Rand a sharp look. What is done is already woven in the pattern. Lan? The horses are ready, the warder said, and we have enough provisions to reach Baerlon with some to spare. We can leave at any time. I suggest now. Not without me. Egwene slipped into the stable, a shawl-wrapped bundle in her arms. Rand nearly fell over his own feet. Lan's sword had come half out of its sheath. When he saw who it was, he shoved the blade back, his eyes suddenly flat. Perrin and Matt began babbling to convince Moraine they had not told Egwene about leaving. The Aes Sedai ignored them. She simply looked at Egwene, tapping her lips thoughtfully with one finger. The hood of Egwene's dark brown cloak was pulled up, but not enough to hide the defiant way she faced Moraine. I have everything I need here, including food, and I will not be left behind. I'll probably never get another chance to see the world outside the Two Rivers. This isn't a picnic trip into the Waterwood, Egwene, Matt growled. He stepped back when she looked at him from under lowered brows. Thank you, Matt. I wouldn't have known. Do you think you three are the only ones who want to see what's outside? I've dreamed about it as long as you have, and I don't intend to miss this chance. How did you find out we were leaving? Rand demanded. Anyway, you can't go with us. We aren't leaving for the fun of it. The Trollocs are after us. She gave him a tolerant look. He flushed and stiffened indignantly. First, she told him patiently, I saw Matt creeping about, trying hard not to be noticed. Then I saw Perrin attempting to hide that absurd great axe under his cloak. I knew Lan had bought a horse, and it suddenly occurred to me to wonder why he needed another. And if he could buy one, he could buy others. Putting that with Matt and Perrin sneaking about like bull cows pretending to be foxes, well, I could only see one answer. I don't know if I'm surprised or not to find you here, Rand, after all your talk about daydreams. With Matt and Perrin involved, I suppose I should have known you would be in it too. I have to go, Egwene, Rand said. All of us do, or the Trollocs will come back. The Trollocs? Egwene laughed incredulously. Rand, if you've decided to see some of the world, well and good. But please spare me any of your nonsensical tales.
Better not
It's
electrocute
true,
myself.
Perrin said as Matt began. The Trollocs. Enough, Moraine said quietly.
Aha!
But it cut their talk as sharply as a knife.
Way to go!
Did anyone else notice all of this? Her voice was soft, but Egwene swallowed and drew herself up before answering. After last night, all they can think about is rebuilding. That and what to do if it happens again. They couldn't see anything else. Nothing was pushed under their noses.
We can
And I
take
told
it!
no one what I suspected. No one. Very well, Moraine said after a moment. You may come with us. A startled expression darted across Lan's face. It was gone in an instant, leaving him outwardly calm, but furious words erupted from him. No, Moraine. It is part of the pattern now, Lan. It is ridiculous, he retorted. There's no reason for her to come along, and every reason for her not to. There is a reason for it, Moraine said calmly. A part of the pattern, Lan. The warder's stony face showed nothing, but he nodded slowly. But Egwene, Rand said, the Trollocs will be chasing us. We won't be safe until we get to Tar Valon. Don't try to fight me, he said. I am going. Rand knew that tone of voice. He had heard it since she decided that climbing the tallest trees was for children. But he remembered it well. If you think being chased by Trollocs will be fun, he began. But Moraine interrupted. We have no time for this. We must be as far away as possible by daybreak.
Follow the old
If she is
man's
left
lead.
behind Rand, she could rouse the village before we have gone a mile. That would surely warn the murderer. Egwene protested. She can ride the Gleeman, the warder said. I'll leave him enough to buy another. That will not be possible, came Tom Maryland's resonant voice from the hayloft. Lan's sword left his teeth this time, and he did not put it back as he stared at the Gleeman. Tom tossed down a blanket roll, then flung his case flute and harp across his back and shouldered bulging saddlebag. This village has no use for me now.
We got this,
On the
Vanilla.
other hand, I have never performed in Tar Valon. And though I usually journey alone, after last night, I have no objections at all to traveling in company. The warder gave Perrin a hard look, and Perrin kicked it uncomfortably. I didn't think looking in the loft, he muttered. As the long-limbed Gleeman scrambled down the ladder from the loft, Lan spoke, stiffly formal. Is this part of the pattern, too? Moraine said I. Everything is a part of the pattern, my old friend, Moraine replied softly. We cannot pick and choose.
Wisdom does come with
But
it.
we shall see. Tom put his feet on the stable floor and turned from the ladder, brushing straw from his patch-covered cloak. In fact, he said in more normal tones, you might say that I insist on traveling in company. I have given many hours over many mugs of ale to thinking of how I might end my days. The Trollocs cookpot was not one of the thoughts.
Finally made it!
He looked askance at the warder's sword. There's no need for that. I am not a cheese for slicing.
You must be tired, huh?
Master Marilyn, Moraine said, we must go quickly and almost certainly in great danger. The Trollocs are still out there, and we go by night. Are you sure that you want to travel with us? Tom eyed the lot of them with a quizzical smile. If it is not too dangerous for the girl, it can't be too dangerous for me. Besides, what Gleeman would not face a little danger to perform in Tar Valon? Moraine nodded, and Lan scabbarded his sword. Rand suddenly wondered what would have happened if Tom had changed his mind, or if Moraine had not nodded. The Gleeman began saddling his horse as if similar thoughts had never crossed his mind, but Rand noticed that he eyed Lan's sword more than once. Now, Moraine said, what horse for Egwene? The peddler's horses are as bad as the Durans, the warrior replied sourly. Strong but slow plodders. Bella, Rand said, getting a look from Lan that made him wish he had kept silent. But he knew he could not dissuade Egwene. The only thing left was to help. Bella may not be as fast as the others, but she's strong. I ride her sometimes. She can keep up. Lan looked into Bella's stall, muttering under his breath. She might be a little better than the others, he said finally.
What's with the
I don't suppose there is any other
You
choice.
be insensitive.
Then she will have to do, Moraine said.
What are you doing
Rand,
moping around
find
here?
a saddle for Bella.
Go find that girl
Quickly
of
now.
yours and I'll throw
We
you
have
guys a
carried too long
romantic
already.
dinner. When you were never.
Rand hurriedly chose a saddle and blanket in the tack room, then fetched Bella from her stall. The mare looked back at him in sleepy surprise when he put the saddle on her back. When he rode her, it was barebacked. She was not used to a saddle. He made soothing noises while he tightened the girth strap, and she accepted the oddity with no more than a shake of her mane. Taking Egwene's bundle from her, he tied it on behind the saddle while she mounted and adjusted her skirts. They were not divided for riding astride, so her wool stockings were bared to the knee. She wore the same soft leather shoes as all the other village girls. They were not at all suited for journeying to Watch Hill, much less Tarvalon. "I still think you shouldn't come," he said. "I wasn't making it up about the Trollocs, but I promise you I will take care of you." "Perhaps I'll take care of you," she replied lightly. At his exasperated look, she smiled and bent down to smooth his hair. "I know you'll look after me, Rand. We will look after each other. But now you had better look after getting on your horse." All of the others were already mounted and waiting for him, he realized. The only horse left riderless was Cloud, a tall gray with a black mane and tail that belonged to John Thane, or had. He scrambled into the saddle, though not without difficulty, as the gray tossed his head and pranced sideways as Rand put his foot in the stirrup, and his scabbard caught in his legs. It was not chance that his friends had not chosen Cloud. Master Thane often raced the spirited gray against merchants' horses, and Rand had never known him to lose. But he had never known Cloud to give anyone an easy ride, either. Land must have given a huge price to make the miller sell. As he settled in the saddle, Cloud's dancing increased, as if the gray were eager to run. Rand gripped the reins firmly and tried to think that he would have no trouble. Perhaps if he convinced himself, he could convince the horse, too. An owl hooted in the night outside, and the village people jumped before they realized what it was. They laughed nervously and exchanged shamefaced looks. "Next thing, field mice will chase us up a tree," Egwene said with an unsteady chuckle. Lan shook his head. "Better if it had been wolves." "Wolves?" Perrin exclaimed, and the warder favored him with a flat stare. "Wolves don't like Trollocs, blacksmith, and Trollocs don't like wolves or dogs either. If I heard wolves, I would be sure there were no Trollocs waiting out there for us." He moved into the moonlit night, walking his tall black slowly. Moraine rode after him without a moment's hesitation, and Egwene kept hard to the Aes Sedai's side. Rand and the Gleeman brought up the rear, following Mat and Perrin. The back of the inn was dark and silent, and dappled moon shadows filled the stable-yard. The soft thuds of the hooves faded quickly, swallowed by the night. In the darkness, the warder's cloak made him a shadow, too. Only the need to let him lead the way kept the others from clustering around him. Getting out of the village without being seen was going to be no easy task, Rand decided as he neared the gate. At least without being seen by villagers. Many windows in the village emitted pale yellow light, and although those glows seemed very small in the night now, shapes moved frequently within them, the shapes of villagers watching to see what this night brought. No one wanted to be caught by surprise again. In the deep shadows beside the inn, just on the point of leaving the stable-yard, Lan abruptly halted, motioning sharply for silence. Boots rattled on the wagon bridge, and here and there on the bridge, moonlight glinted off metal. The boots clattered across the bridge, grated on gravel, and approached the inn. No sound at all came from those in the shadow. Rand suspected his friends, at least, were too frightened to make a noise, like him. The footsteps halted before the inn in the grayness just beyond the dim light from the common room windows. It was not until John Thane stepped forward, a spear propped on his stout shoulder, an old jerkin, sewn all over with steel discs, straining across his chest, that Rand saw them for what they were. A dozen men from the village and the surrounding farms, some in helmets or pieces of armor that had lain dust-covered in attics for generations, all with a spear or a wood axe or a rusty bill. The miller peered into a common room window, then turned with a curt, "It looks right here." The others formed in two ragged ranks behind him, and the patrol marched into the night as if stepping to three different drums. "Two double Trollocs would have them all for breakfast," Lan muttered when the sound of their boots had faded. "But they have eyes and ears." He turned his stallion back. "Come." Slowly, quietly, the warder took them back across the stable-yard, down the bank, through the willows, and into the wine-spring water. So close to the wine-spring itself, the cold, swift water, gleaming as it swirled around the horse's legs, was deep enough to lap against the soles of the riders' boots. Climbing out on the far bank, a line of horses wound its way under the warder's deft direction, keeping away from any of the village houses. From time to time, Lan stopped, signing them all to be quiet, though no one else heard or saw anything. Each time he did, however, another patrol of villagers and farmers soon passed. Slowly they moved toward the north edge of the village. Rand peered at the high-peaked houses in the dark, trying to impress them on his memory. "A fine adventurer I am," he thought. He was not even out of the village yet, and already he was homesick. But he did not stop looking. They passed beyond the last farmhouses on the outskirts of the village and into the countryside, paralleling the north road that led to Tarn Ferry. Rand thought that surely no night sky elsewhere could be as beautiful as the Two Rivers sky. The clear black seemed to reach forever, and myriad stars gleamed like points of light scattered through crystal.
It's all or nothing.
The moon, only a thin slice less than full,
Here.
appeared almost close enough. Stretched and a black shape flew slowly across the silvery ball of the moon. Rand's involuntary jerk on the reins halted the gray. A bat, he thought weakly, but he knew it was not. Bats were a common sight of an evening, darting after flies and bite-me's in the twilight. The wings that carried this creature might have the same shape, but they moved with the slow, powerful sweep of a bird of prey. And it was hunting.
Be wary,
The way
but
it
don't be
cast back and
afraid.
forth in the long arcs left no doubt of that. Worst of all was the size. For a bat to seem so large against the moon, it would have
Use
had
the
to be
right
almost within
supply
arm's
to keep
reach.
us moving in the right
He
direction.
tried to judge in his mind how far away it must be and how big. The body of it had to be as large as a man, and the wings... It crossed the face of the moon again, wheeling suddenly downward to be engulfed by the night. He did not realize that Lan had ridden back to him until the water caught his arm. What are you sitting here and staring at, boy? We have to keep moving. The others waited behind Lan. Half expecting to be told he was letting fear of the Trollocs overcome his sense, Rand told what he had seen. He hoped that Lan would dismiss it as a bat or a trick of his eyes. Lan growled a word, sounding as if it left a bad taste in his mouth. Drogkar. Egwene and the other Two Rivers folk stared at the sky nervously in all directions, but the
Chasing
gleeman
after
groaned
enemies.
softly.
It's a surefire way to get
Yes,
ambushed.
Moraine said. It is too much to hope otherwise. And if the Myrddraal has a dragcar at his command, then he will soon know where we are, if he does not already. We must move more quickly than we can cross-country. We may still reach Tarn Ferry ahead of the Myrddraal. He and his Trollocs will not cross as easily as we. A dragcar? Egwene said. What is it? It was Tom Maryland who answered her hoarsely. In the
Be
war
ready
that
for the
ended the
next
Age of
fight.
Legends, worse than Trollocs and Halfmen were created. Moraine's head jerked toward him as he spoke.
I'm right
Not even the
behind
dark could hide the sharpness of her look. Before anyone could ask the gleeman for more, Lan began giving directions. We take to the North Road now. For your lives, follow my
Time to
lead,
move.
keep up and keep together. He wheeled his horse about, and the others galloped wordlessly after
Trust
him.
me to cover your tail.
Chapter 11.
And stay focused
The
on
road
moving
to
forward.
Tarn Ferry. On the hard-packed dirt of the North Road, the horses stretched out, manes and tails streaming back in the moonlight as they raced northward, hooves pounding a steady rhythm. Lan led the way, black horse and shadow-clad rider all but invisible in the cold night. Moraine's white mare, matching the stallion stride for stride, was a pale dart speeding through the dark. The rest followed in a tight line, as if they were all tied to a rope with one end in the warder's hands. Rand galloped last in line, with Tom Maryland just ahead, and the others left to sink beyond. The gleeman never turned his head, reserving his eyes for where they ran, not what they ran from. If Trolloc appeared behind, the fade on its silent horse, or that flying creature, the Drogkar, it would be up to Rand to sound an alarm. Every few minutes, he craned his neck to peer behind while he clung to Cloud's mane and reins. The Drogkar, worse than Trollocs and Fays, Thomas said. The sky was empty, and only darkness and shadows met his eyes on the ground. Shadows that could hide an army. Now that the gray had been let loose to run, the animal sped through the night like a ghost, easily keeping pace with Lan's stallion. And Cloud wanted to go faster. He wanted to catch the black, strained to catch the black. Rand had to keep a firm hand on the reins to hold him back. Cloud lunged against his strength, and the gray thought this were a race, fighting him for mastery with every stride. Rand flung to saddle and reins with every muscle taut. Fervently, he hoped his mount did not detect how uneasy he was. Cloud did,
Just
he would
like I
lose the
planned.
one real edge he held, however precariously. Lying low on Cloud's neck, Rand kept a worried eye on Bella and on her rider. When he had said the shaggy mare could stay with the others, he had not meant on the run. She kept up now only by running as he had not thought she could. Lan had not wanted Egwene in their number. Would he slow for her if Bella began to flag? Or would he try to leave her behind? The Aes Sedai and the Warder thought Rand and his friends were important in some way, but for all of Moraine's talk of the pattern, he did not think they included Egwene in that importance. If Bella fell back, he would fall back too, whatever Moraine and Lan had to say about it. Back where the Fade and the Trollocs were. back where the Drakkar was. With all his heart and desperation,
need to rush.
he silently shouted at Bella to run like the wind. Silently tried to will strength into her.
Just block out everything else.
His skin prickled, and his bones felt as if they were freezing, ready to split open. The light helped her run. Bella ran. On and on they sped, northward into the night, time fading into an indistinct blur. Now and again, the lights of farmhouses flashed into sight, then disappeared as quickly as imagination. Dogs' sharp challenges faded swiftly behind, or cut off abruptly as the dogs decided they had been chased away. They raced through darkness, relieved only by watery, pale moonlight. A darkness where trees along the road loomed up without warning, then were gone. For the rest, murk surrounded them, and only a solitary night bird's cry, lonely and mournful, disturbed the steady pounding of hooves. Abruptly, Lan slowed, then brought the file of horses to a stop. Rand was not sure how long they had been moving, but a soft ache filled his legs from gripping the saddle. Ahead of them in the night, lights sparkled, as if a tall swarm of flies held one place among the trees. Rand frowned at the lights in puzzlement, then suddenly gasped with surprise. The fireflies were windows of houses covering the sides and top of a hill. It was Watch Hill. He could hardly believe they had come so far. They had probably made the journey as fast as it had ever been traveled. Following Lan's example, Rand and Tom Maryland dismounted. Cloud stood head down, sides heaving. Lather, almost indistinguishable from the horse's smoky side, flecked the gray's neck and shoulders. Rand thought that Cloud would not be carrying anyone further that night. Much as I would like to put all these villages behind me, Tom announced, a few hours' rest would not go amiss right now. Surely we have enough of a lead to allow that. Rand stretched, knuckling the small of his back. If we're stopping the rest of the night in Watch Hill, we may as well go on up. A vagrant gust of wind brought a fragment of song from the village and smells of cooking that made his mouth water. They were still celebrating in Watch Hill. There had been no frolic to disturb their bell time. He looked for Egwene. She was leaning against Bella, plump with weariness. The others were climbing down as well, with many a sigh and much stretching of aching muscles. Only the warder and the Aes Sedai showed no visible sign of fatigue. Matt put in tiredly. And maybe a hot mutton pie at the White Boar. Pausing, he added, I've never been further than Watch Hill. The White Boar is not nearly as good as the Wine Spring Inn.
The military uses this place for bioweapons
Sarah
research.
said. Mutton pie for me, too. And lots of hot tea to take the chill off my bones. We cannot stop until we are across the Torrent, Lan said sharply. Not for more than a few minutes. But the horses, Rand protested.
Enemy's actions.
We'll run them to death if we try to go any further tonight. Moraine Sedai, surely
I can do this.
He had vaguely noticed her moving among the horses, but he had not paid any real attention to what she did. Now she brushed past him to lay her hands on Cloud's. Rand fell silent. Suddenly the horse tossed his head with a soft whicker, nearly pulling the reins from Rand's hand.
Wake up.
The gray danced a step sideways, rested as if he had spent a week in a stable. Without a word, Moraine went to Bella. No, Rand said softly to Lan. You, of all people, should have suspected it, the warder replied. You walked with your father. You will wash all the fatigue away. First from the horses, then from the rest of you. The rest of us? Not you? Not me, sheepherder. I don't need it, not yet. Not her. What she can do for others, she cannot do for herself. Only one of us will ride tired. We had better hope he does not grow too tired before he reaches Tarvalon. Too tired for what? Rand asked the warder. You are right about your belly, said She has a good heart, and as much stubbornness as the rest of you two rivers folk. Strange as it seems, she may be the least weary of all. The scream ripped the darkness, a sound like a man dying under black knives. His wings swooped low above the party. The night deepened in the shadow that swept over them. With panicked strides, the horses reared wildly. The wind of the Grakkar's wings beat at Rand with a feel like a touch of storm. Like chittering in the dense dimness of a nightmare. He had no time even to feel the fear of it, for Cloud exploded into the air with a scream of his own, twisting desperately as if attempting to shake off some clinging thing. Rand, hanging onto the reins, was jerked off his feet and dragged across the ground, Cloud screaming as though the big gray felt wolves tearing at his hocks. Somehow he maintained his grip on the reins. Using the other hand, as much as his legs, he scrambled onto his feet, taking leaping, staggering steps to keep from being pulled down again. His breath came in ragged pants of desperation. He could not let Cloud get away. He threw out a frantic hand, barely catching the bridle. Cloud reared, lifting him into the air. Rand clung helplessly, hoping against hope that the horse would quiet him. The shock of landing jarred Rand to his feet, but suddenly the gray was still, nostrils flared and eyes open, stiff-legged and trembling. Rand was trembling as well, and all but hanging from the bridle.
Just another battle.
He took 3 or 4 deep, shaky breaths. Only then could he look around and see what had happened to the others.
Don't stray too far.
Chaos reigned among the party. They clutched reins against jerking heads, trying with little success to calm the rearing horses that dragged them about in a milling mass. Only 2 seemingly had no trouble at all with their mounts. Moraine sat straight in her saddle, the white mare stepping delicately away from the confusion.
We can't just rush into
all
this.
out of the ordinary had happened. On foot, Lan scanned the sky, sword in one hand and reins in the other. 2 black stallions stood quietly beside him. Sounds of merrymaking no longer came from Watch Hill. Those in the village must have heard the cry too.
Maybe we should try something
they would
else.
listen a while, perhaps watch for what had caused it, then return to their dulling. They would soon forget the incident, memories submerged by song and food and dance and fun. Perhaps when they heard the news of what had happened in Emmons Field, some would remember and wonder. A fiddle began to play. After a moment, a flute joined in. The village was resuming its celebration.
Be ready for the next fight.
Mount, Lang commanded curtly. Sheathing his sword, he leaped onto the stallion. The Drakkar would not have showed itself unless it had already reported our whereabouts to the Murdraw. Another strident shriek drifted down from far above, fainter but no less harsh. The music from Watch Hill silenced raggedly once more. Drax's now, marking us for the Half-Man. He won't be far. The horses, fresh now as well as being fear-struck, pranced and backed away from those trying to mount. The cursing Tom Maryland was the first into his saddle, but the others were up soon after. All but one. "Hurry, Rand!" Egwene shouted. The Drakkar gave shrill voice once more, and Bella ran a few steps before she could rein the mare in. "Hurry!" With a start, Rand realized that instead of trying to mount Cloud, he had been standing there staring at the sky in a vain attempt to locate the source of those vile screams. More, all unaware, he had drawn Tam's sword as if to fight the flying thing. His face reddened, making him glad for the knife to hide him. Awkwardly, with one hand occupied by the reins, he retrieved the blade, glancing hastily at the others. Moraine, Lan, and Egwene all were looking at him, though he could not be sure how much they could see in the moonlight.
Way to go!
The rest seemed too absorbed with keeping their horses under control to pay him any mind. He put a hand on the pommel and reached the saddle in one leap, as if he had been doing the like all his life. If any of his friends had noticed the sword, he would surely hear about it later. There would be time enough to worry about it then. As soon as he was in the saddle, they were all off at a gallop again, up the road, by the dome-like hill. Dogs barked in the village. Their passage was not entirely unnoticed. Or maybe the dogs smelled frogs, Rand thought. The barking and the village lights alike vanished quickly behind them. They galloped in a knot, horses all but jostling each other as they ran. Lan ordered them to spread out again, but no one wanted to be even a little alone in the night. A scream came from high overhead. The warder gave up and let them run clustered. Rand was close behind Moraine and Lan, the gray straining in an effort to force himself between the warder's black and the Aes Sedai's thin mare. Egwene and the Gleeman raced on either flank of him, while Rand's friends crowded in behind. Cloud, spurred by the Drakkar's cries, ran beyond anything Rand could do to slow him, even if he had wished to. Yet the gray could not gain so much as a step on the other 2 horses. The Drakkar's shriek challenged him. Stout Bella ran with neck outstretched and tail and mane streaming in the wind of her running, matching the larger horses every stride. The Aes Sedai must have done something more than simply ridding her of fatigue. Egwene's face in the moonlight was smiling in excited delight. Her braid streamed behind like the horse's manes, and the gleam in her eyes was not all from the moon, Rand was sure. His mouth dropped open in surprise until a swallowed bite me set him off into a fit of coughing.
No holding back!
Lan must have asked a question, for Moraine suddenly shouted over the wind and the pounding of hooves. "I cannot. Most especially not from the back of a galloping horse. They are not easily killed, even when they can be seen. We must run and hope." They galloped through a pattern of fog, thin and no higher than the horse's knees. Cloud sped through it in 2 strides, and Rand blinked, wondering if he had imagined it. Surely the night was too cold for fog. Another patch of ragged gray whisked by them to one side, larger than the first. It had been growing, as if the mist oozed from the ground. Above them, the Drakkar screamed in rage. Fog enveloped the riders for a brief moment and was gone. Came again, and vanished behind. The icy mist left a chill dampness on Rand's face and hands. Then a wall of pale gray loomed before them, and they were suddenly enshrouded. The thickness of it muffled the sound of their hooves to dullness, and the cries from overhead seemed to come through a wall. Rand could only just make out the shapes of Egwene and Tom Marilyn on either side of him. Rand did not slow their pace. "There is still only one place we can be going," he called, his voice sounding hollow and directionless. "Myrddraal are sly," Moraine replied. "I will use its own slyness against it." They galloped on silently. Slaty mist obscured both sky and ground, so that the riders themselves turned to shadow, appeared to float through night clouds. Even the legs of their own horses seemed to have vanished. Rand shifted in his saddle, shrinking away from the icy fog. Knowing that Moraine could do things, even seeing her do them, was one thing. Having those things leave his skin damp was something else again. He realized he was holding his breath, too, and called himself 9 kinds of idiot. He could not ride all the way to Tarn Ferry without breathing. She had used the one power on Tam, and he seemed all right. Still, he had to make himself let that breath go and inhale. The air was heavy, but if colder, it was otherwise no different than that on any other foggy night. He told himself that, but he was not sure he believed it. Lan encouraged them to keep close now, to stay where each could see the outlines of others in that damp, frosty grayness. Yet the warder still did not slacken his stallion's dead run. Side by side, Lan and Moraine led the way through the fog as if they could see clearly what lay ahead. The rest could only trust and follow, and hope. The shrill cries that had hounded them faded as they galloped, and then were gone, but that gave small comfort. Forest and farmhouses, moon and road were shrouded and hidden. Dogs still barked, hollow and distant in the gray haze, when they passed farms, but there was no other sound save the dull drumming of their horses' hooves. Nothing in that featureless ashen fog changed. Nothing gave any hint of the passage of time except the growing ache in thigh and back. It had to have been hours, Rand was sure. His hands had clutched his reins until he was not sure he could release them, and he wondered if he would ever walk properly again. He glanced back only once. Shadows in the fog raced behind him, but he could not even be certain of their number, or even that they really were his friends. The chill and damp soaked through his cloak and coat and shirt, soaked into his bones, so it seemed. Only the rush of air past his face and the gather and stretch of the horse beneath him told him he was moving at all. It must have been hours. "Lo!" Lan called suddenly. "Draw rein!" Rand was so startled that Cloud forced between Lan and Moraine, forging ahead for half a dozen strides before he could pull the big gray to a halt and stare. Houses loomed in the fog on all sides, houses strangely tall to Rand's eye. He had never seen this place before, but he had often heard descriptions. That tallness came from high redstone foundations, necessary when the spring melt in the mountains of mist made the Tarn overflow its banks. They had reached Tarn Ferry. Lan trotted the black warhorse past him. "Don't be so eager, sheepherder." Discomfited, Rand fell into place without explaining as the party moved deeper into the village. His face was hot, and for the moment the fog was welcome. A lone dog, unseen in the cold mist, barked at them furiously, then ran away. Here and there a light appeared in a window as some early risers stirred. Other than the dog, no sound save the muted clops of their horses' hooves disturbed the last hour of the night. Rand had met few people from Tarn Ferry. He tried to recall what little he knew about them. They seldom ventured down into what they called the lower villages, with their noses up as if they smelled something bad. The few he had met bore strange names like Hilltop and Stoneboat. One and all, Tarn Ferry folk had a reputation for slyness and trickery. If you shook hands with a Tarn Ferryman, people said, you counted your fingers afterward. Lan and Moraine stopped before a tall, dark house that looked exactly like any other in the village. Fog swirled around the water like smoke as he leaped from his saddle and mounted the stairs that rose to the front door, as high above the street as their
Ready
head.
for ambushes.
At the top of the stairs, Lan hammered with his fist on the door. I thought he wanted quiet.